Howdy folks, it's the second week of March 2025, and welcome to This Week in the West. I'm Seth Spillman, broadcasting from the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. On this podcast, we share stories of the people and events that shape the history, art, and culture of the American West, and those still shaping it today. The harsh Nebraska winters had never been kind to Mari Sandoz. When she was young, she'd spent an entire day digging her family's cattle out of a snowdrift, permanently losing vision in one of her eyes due to snow blindness. It was the winter of 1928 when Mari was called back home to her parents. Mari's father was dying and had one final request for her. He wanted her to tell his life story. Mari would do just that, becoming a celebrated novelist and biographer of the life and struggles of settlers, Native Americans, and others who made the American West. We remember her during the week of her death, March 10th, 1966. Mari's father was Jules Sandoz, a Swiss immigrant who tried to scrape out a living for his family against an unforgiving northwest Nebraska prairie. His last request for his daughter shocked her. She'd spent much of her youth at odds with the domineering man. Before that day, he'd always discouraged her from even thinking of becoming a writer. He had told her, "You know I consider artists and writers the maggots of society." But she would say yes to the dying man, transforming his plea into a literary career. After years of painstaking research, the book about her father, entitled Old Jules, would be published in 1935, establishing her reputation. Mari was born in 1896 near Hayes Spring, Nebraska, the oldest of 6 children. She only spoke German until age 9. As a child, her family's focus was on backbreaking labor and discipline rather than education. While she loved to read and write, it took her until age 17 to graduate from the 8th grade, the furthest she would get in school. But Mari was determined to become a teacher. She secretly took and passed the rural teacher's exam, enabling her to teach in local country schools without attending high school. At 18, she married a neighboring rancher, Ray McCumber, but the marriage was short-lived. In 1919, citing extreme mental cruelty, she divorced him and moved to Lincoln, seeking a fresh start. Now on her own, Mari took on low-paying jobs while trying to establish herself as a writer, but her efforts were met with overwhelming rejection. She submitted short stories under her married name, Mari McCumber, piling up more than 1,000 rejection slips. Despite no high school diploma, she managed to enroll at the University of Nebraska, where a sympathetic dean recognized her talent. Then came 1928 and her father's deathbed request. Getting Old Jules published was an uphill battle, with every major publisher in the country rejecting it. Mari was living on the edge, trying to make this dream happen. Malnourished and in poor health, she moved back to Nebraska's Sand Hills to live with her mother. Frustrated by failure, she burned more than 70 of her unpublished manuscripts. In 1935, after 14 rejections, Old Jules finally won a nonfiction contest held by Atlantic Press. They wanted to publish her work, but she had to battle to ensure her characters retained their authentic Western tone and vernacular. Once the book reached the public, it became an instant bestseller. Old Jules shocked readers with its unflinching portrayal of frontier life, but it also cemented Mari's reputation as an authentic voice of her region. Mari's 1937 novel, Slogum House, depicted a ruthless Nebraska family and served as a warning against the rise of fascism. The novel was deemed vulgar and was banned from libraries in Omaha, Nebraska. Her next novel, Capital City, targeted political corruption in Lincoln, Nebraska, prompting a wave of hate mail. Weary of the backlash, Mari moved to Denver in 1940. In 1942, after moving to New York City, she wrote what many consider her greatest work, Crazy Horse, The Strange Man of the Oglalas. In this biography of the legendary Lakota leader, Mari did something groundbreaking at the time. She wrote from within the Lakota worldview, using their concepts, metaphors, and speech patterns. This approach was ahead of its time. She described her intent in the book's preface, saying she aimed to express something of his relationship to the earth and the sky and all that is between. She continued her interest in Plains Indian culture with subsequent works like Cheyenne Autumn in 1953. She also expanded her focus to the broader history of the Great Plains, with a series exploring the connection between the region and its animals in the books The Buffalo Hunter, The Cattleman, and The Beaverman. Even as she battled bone cancer in the final months of her life, Mari Sandoz continued to write. She died on March 10, 1966, at age 69. In 1998, she was inducted posthumously into our Hall of Great Westerners here at the Cowboy. And with that, we'll close the book on another episode of This Week in the West. Our show is produced by Chase Spivey and written by Mike Kaler. Follow us and rate us on Apple Podcasts, wherever you hear us. That'll help us reach more people. You can follow us on social media and online at nationalcowboymuseum.org. Got a question or a suggestion? Drop us an email at podcast@nationalcowboymuseum.org. We leave you today with the words of Mari Sandoz from her novel Crazy Horse. Man living alone can do as it pleases him. If he lives among others, he must bow the head to the good of all. Without strong leaders to see this done, the people will fail, and the nation will break up into small, defenseless bands. Much obliged for listening, and remember, come find your West here at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum.